Hey, what's up, guys? It's Apollo Chia here, back with another part of What If Naruto Was in a Political Marriage. This is the part 11, I believe. And before continuing this part, I would like to make an announcement. I will be uploading a new What If tomorrow, and I hope you like it. So, I'm not gonna give any spoilers for that. And without further ado, let's continue. Oh, yeah, guys, if you like my content, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. We crossed 805 subscribers. We're almost at 810, and by the end of this week I hope we can cross 900. Yeah, that's our target of this week. So without further ado, let's continue. Chapter 15, The Misunderstandings. Naruto woke up feeling like his head had been put under a pressure grinder. After painfully opening his eyes, he took stock of his situation. Naruto was in an extremely fluffy bed, being glomped from the front by Yujito, and was also in a domicile that he did not recognize. This was weird for him and extremely worried him until he remembered how he was teleported to Cloud, where he hit his head. Connecting a few dots, he concluded that the room was in either belonged to Yujito or was provided by the resident Kage. Having Yujito glomped onto his front, he was able to see that her eyes were going crazy under her eyelids, signifying intense dreaming. On one hand, Naruto really needed to get up and treat the growing pain on his head, but on the other hand, waking up someone while he rams was never a good idea. He was having a great idea. He did a quick substitution jutsu with a pillow next to him and started to look around the apartment. It was one floor apartment with bedroom area, a living room, kitchen area, a small laundry closet, and a bathroom area. He also noticed that it was bare of most of the things that a residence would usually have, such as pictures or a TV. On a nearby clock, it read 8:30 a.m. His body odor wasn't the healthiest. After all, he hadn't showered in about 2 weeks, so he decided to take some liberties with the apartment and went to shower, where he stripped off his normal wear and stepped into said shower. As the warm water cascaded onto his form, he let out a loud sigh. It was really refreshing to let all the stink off his body, and the hot water did a lot helping it. He was so relaxed that he unknowingly stayed in the shower for 30 minutes. Apparently, the hot water was never ending, or else he would have noticed him staying in the shower for as long as he did. What he did immediately notice was the door to the room opening. Peeking around the curtains, he was met with the glassy eyed from the Yujito. He very nearly screamed in the most feminine and shrill way possible, but was able to conclude that she had something important to say before he was able to do it. "What do you want, Yujito?" he asked breathlessly. She was silent for a moment before replying, "I want you," she slurred out. Naruto's sweat dropped. "What?" She was silent for another moment before grunting and walking closer to the shower. This slightly freaked him out. What's going on, Yujito? What are you going to do?" he said nervously. She started breathing outwards. I want, she said, all the while continuing to walk closer to the shower and the naked Naruto. Naruto's brain went on rapid fire. Is this what Pervy Sage meant? Does she really want to be with me? But why is she walking to me? And why are her eyes glazed over? I don't think I'm ready for sex. All while he was having these thoughts, Yujito made it to the shower and calmly walked in, still wearing her clothes. Why is she still wearing her clothes? Naruto was really freaking out now. He had no experience with the opposite sex or with sex in general. Not only that, he was 13, damn it. He felt extremely fear and trepidation for what was about to happen. He saw how the water forced the pajamas onto her skin, almost initiating her curves. She was nearly breathless and ghostly silent. Naruto's heart began to beat at extremely rapid levels. This wasn't how he wanted to lose his virginity, not while having a skull-splitting headache and with a woman that, although he cared about, hardly knew. Whatever he was expecting to happen, he wasn't expecting her to grab the soap bar and started lathering herself while still clothed, creating a soapy mess of her pajamas. What the actual fuck? He was extremely confused. until he was able to connect the few more dots. Glazed over eyes, slow, unsure movements, doing things that were extremely illogical, weird speech pattern. Yuito was fucking sleepwalking. Naruto remembered hearing about sleepwalking during one of his many trips to the hospital, but seeing it in actuality was really weird. Yuito was usually so calm, confident, and stoic, and now here she was, lathering her clothed form with soap. It was actually really comical, and Naruto would have laughed in relief if not for his still pounding skull and rapid heartbeat. Leaving her to her own devices, he stepped out of the shower, dried himself off, and half clothed himself before looking back at the shower. The shower was wide open, making water cascade to the floor. She was going to make a huge mess. Naruto was really tempted to just walk away from the situation, but his consciousness got the better of him. He walked over to the shower and turned the water off. She was still lathering herself with nothing, so it looked like she was repeatedly rubbing her wet clothed body. Naruto grabbed her hand and slowly led her on out of the shower. She was sopping wet, and no amount of toweling off would dry her pajamas. She had to get off the clothes so she wouldn't be wet and so she wouldn't catch cold. Naruto sighed, looked away, and began unbuttoning her top pajama. He refused to be a pervert like Jiraiya after her pajamas top was wide open. He, while still looking away, got her to shrug it off, and she didn't wear underwear under her sleepwear. Okay, top done. Just move to the bottom. He grabbed the spandex part and quickly pulled it down. Carefully not to look up, he crouched down and lifted each leg quickly to get her legs out of the leg holes. When she was completely naked, he began to towel her off. From when she was dry to a sufficient degree, he led her back to the room while naked and got her to lie back down on bed. After covering her up with the blanket, she immediately fell back to normal sleep. Naruto sighed. Well, that was an ordeal, he thought to himself. He then went to the kitchen to look for any headache pills, and after sourcing the place, he finally found some in one of the topmost drawers and quickly downed a couple with a glass of water. He went back to the bathroom and cleaned up the room and floor with some spare towels. After doing that, he clumped up all the towels and the clothes sans his own and brought them over to the laundry closet thing to dump them all in. Naruto then started to cleaning cycle. Once the bedroom was all cleaned up, he re-entered it in order to get fully clothed and went to go get some breakfast. Her pantry consisted of a single box of cereal. Shrugging his shoulder, he quickly made a bowl of it for himself and downed it almost immediately. He went to get a look outside, but a package blocked the door from being fully opened. Looking down on it, he noticed that it had a note on it. Dear Naruto Uzumaki, you are to start your training this morning at 10 at training ground 8. Don't be late. We promised you with our traditional Kumo Chunin wear. He looked at the clock. 9:50. Eyes growing wide, he shut the door, opened the box, and feverishly began stripping his clothes off and replacing the clothes with the Chunin fatigues. Once he was presentable, he ran out of the door and began speeding off. After realizing that he didn't know where training ground 8 was, he slowed down and ran up to the nearest shinobi that he could find. She was dark-skinned, had red hair, was wearing furry dress under her Kumo Chunin fatigues, and had a sword strapped to her back. Do you know where training ground 8 is? He quickly asked. One of her eyebrows rose. Yeah, that's where I'm heading now. Why do you need to know? I'm supposed to be there by 10, he said quickly, fearing that he might be late. Just follow me, we were not that far, she said, still confused. Why would this guy need to go to our training ground? She didn't voice her concerns, however, and just began to speed off in the direction that she had been heading before being interrupted by Naruto, who quickly followed suit. As they were running, Karui decided to interrogate the shinobi slightly. What's your name? Naruto. Naruto, I swear I've heard that name before. How old are you? 13, he answered. That's how old I am. Why didn't I see you in the academy? Oh, I'm new here. You're new here? How does a Kumo Chunin just became a Kumo Chunin? Well, they gave me the best. That's not what I meant. How could a person new to Kumo become a Chunin level shinobi? I'm not even from Kumo, I'm from Konoha. Karui's eyes grew wide. Oh, so he must be the missionary. She had, of course, heard about the agreement between the nations to not wage war, to train together, yada yada yada, but she was having slight trouble believing that the shinobi that was running next to her was a diplomat from Konoha and that was meant to represent an entire village. Aren't you kind of young to be a missionary from Konoha? Naruto, not knowing what a missionary meant, took her phrase to be an incredulous that he was the part of the symbolic marriage that was representing his hidden village. It had been a few weeks. Details of the marriage would be known to the people, so he wasn't very surprised that she recognized him. And even if she actually didn't, yes, I am way too young to be the missionary from Konoha. He spoke in deadpan. Miscommunication leads to misunderstanding, which leads to conflict, which leads to death, which leads to hate, and thus the cycle of hate perpetuates itself. So it was good thing that this miscommunication was over, something that had extremely little prevalence in the shinobi world. Karui's eyes widened. That wasn't the sort of response that she had been expecting. If you're too young, why are you here? It's a long story, Naruto said exasperatedly, but it could all be summed up as my dad fucked up. Kaori decided not to pray any further and they reached the training ground with no more conversation. It was there that they met up with the rest of her team, Sans and their sensei. Standing in the open was a fairly well endowed blonde Konoichi wearing a miniskirt under her Kumo fatigue and a tanto on her back. You readily noticed that her vest had been slightly modified to accommodate her large bust size. The person standing next to her was a dark-skinned male wearing standard Kumo fatigues, had a katana on his back, and was sucking on a lollipop. Oi, Amoy! Stand up straight and show some respect. This guy's a Konoha's missionary in Kumo. Kaori ordered to her laid-back teammate. His eyes widened considerably while Sumui only widened marginally. Had to keep a cool appearance after all. His back stood up straighter. Hello Konoha-san. I'm Amoy, and this is Samui. We're honored to have you here. He then proceeded to bow respectfully. This definitely surprised Naruto. It's cool. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you. It's cool to meet you too, Uzumaki-san. Samui responded. Just call me Naruto, he said amicably. So, why was I called here? B said that we're supposed to train you, Amoy responded. But he was busy writing songs, so he couldn't meet up with you. Okay, what are we going to start with? Do you know any kanjutsu? Amoy asked. I know how to throw kunai and shuriken. Amoy sweat drops. Practically all of our skill set is composed of sword wielding. What can you do with a sword that you can't with a kunai? Naruto knew that swords provided larger reach and were generally more deadlier than kunai, but he didn't know why there had to be an entire shinobi discipline dedicated to the art. Amoy promptly unsheathed his katana, shouted out, "Head cleaver," and swung his sword in the direction of a few dummies, beheading all of them at once in a fantastic display of chakra being flung at high speed from his blade. Amoy was breathing slightly. Sometimes it takes a bit of chakra, but if you had good control and good kanjutsu skills, then you can do a lot of extremely useful maneuvers. Naruto was dumbstruck. Where do I start? Amoy took out a scroll and unsealed a katana from it. He then handed it over to Naruto. It's my spare. You can use it for now. Oh, okay, thanks. Naruto experimentally unsheathed the blade and held it out in front of him, getting a feeling for the weight. Katanas are extremely versatile weapons. They are flexible but also extremely sharp, which can only be achieved when using different metal types during the forging process. I'm imbued with some chakra metal. They can store chakra for short periods of time and if manipulated correctly can be used to discharge all that chakra in single direction. Okay, Naruto said, understanding so far. However, to get to the point where you can safely discharge chakra, you have to have the katas of the movement transcribed to your muscle memory and have the ability to actually internally mold the chakra, extremely push that chakra into the blade, extremely mold that chakra and extremely discharge that chakra, all the while being careful to manipulate it correctly. Okay, Naruto didn't really understand all the chakra mumbo jumbo, but he'd crossed that bridge when it came to it. For now, we'll just go over the katas. There are a lot of strikes that are supposed to be used against opponents with different knowledge in the wielding various weapons, as well as one open-handed battle. But for now, we'll just focus on the strikes that have to do with fighting another Genjutsu user. Naruto nodded. Amoy began showing him how to do all the strikes, from overhead to side to diagonal etc., and critiquing him on all the points that Naruto was getting wrong in when he tried to do it himself. Is everyone a better teacher than Kakashi Sensei? Naruto mumbled to himself. What was that? Amoy asked. Nothing, Naruto said with a grin. Link break. Back at Yujito's apartment. Yujito just woke up from her extremely long sleeping session. She began to stretch her body out and sought the warmth and comfort that the bedmate would usually provide. After reaching out under the covers of the entire bed, she concluded that her bedmate was gone. Yujito slowly sat up straight and arched her back out to stretch out the kinks. She wasn't expecting her nipples to harden at the sudden loss of warmth and introduction to the chilly air. Yujito looked down and noticed a lot of other things about her current situation, namely that she was naked and her hair was so wet. She took Naruto's absence to be a bit more serious after noticing these other two things. What happened? Why am I naked? Why is my hair wet? She pondered herself quickly. As she got up and dressed for the day, I could have sworn that I fell asleep in my pajamas. Walking into the living room, she was sighing for another person getting ready for the day. Things like an unwashed bowl of cereal, the washer running, the shower obviously having been used, but what got most of her attention was Naruto clothes scattered around the entire entryway of the house. Yujito started getting extremely worried. She went to the washer, looked inside. Sure enough, the pajamas that she could have sworn that she wore last night were swirling around inside of that. Her brain started connecting the dots in the incorrect order. She woke up naked. She had showered at some time. Naruto's clothes were scattered about the entrance. Her own clothes were in the washer and he hadn't woken up with her. The truth hit her like a ton of bricks. She slumped against the nearest wall for support, but slowly slipped down as her legs lost the ability to support themselves. Her eyes were wide and her mouth was open in shock. I slept with him. Holy shit. I slept with him. But why can't I remember anything? His clothes were haphazardly swept across the entrance, which might have signifying the struggle. No, I didn't just sleep with him. I raped him. Utter revolution swept into her being. The first person that she had sworn to protect for a long time, she had just raped him. Yujito felt like she needed to puke. She crawled over to the toilet and began to dry heaves. It was horrible, the feeling that she was having. It was sheer and utter contempt to her being. She felt dirty on the inside and outside and everywhere between. After her dry, heavily episode was over with, she slumped back onto the wall and cupped her face into her hands. This could mean the end of the peace treaty between the nations, but most importantly, the end of her relationship with Naruto. She had just gotten a friend, a little brother, a person who she could look after, protect, and get stronger to protect. And she had just ended that. I'm sorry guys if I'm going too fast. I'm just ill today and I want to get this over with. And sorry for the stutter in between. Now let's continue our story. She leaned her head back against the wall and just sat there for the time being. She had to think things through. Okay, just because his clothes were strewn about doesn't mean I raped him. For all I know, I could have been completely consensual. Another wave of revolution swept across her being. Why can't I fucking remember anything? She gripped her still wet hair and with both of her hands, signifying frustration. So his clothes were off, my clothes were off, my clothes somehow ended up in the washer, and we probably slept in the same bed at some point. I don't think I could spin that in any other way than us having sex. She started breathing in and out deeply. Christ, maybe Koretsuchi was right. Maybe I am a Shotokan. Yujito slowly began to get up. Yo, Matatabe. She heard grumbling in the back of her head. What? Came the bleary voice of her resident Biju. Do you remember anything about last night? I remember being asleep. Why? I think I had sex with Naruto. This gained the sexless Biju immediate attention. Wow, kitten, how bold of you. No, not bold, disgusting. I just had sex with a shinobi half my age and I don't even remember it. What about that saying? Old enough to kill, old enough to fuck. What saying? I never heard that. Not only that, but nobody is old enough to kill. Killing is a service that one must undertake for safety of either the self or the country. Nobody is old enough to kill. While there are certainly a lot of reasons why people shouldn't be old enough to have sex. Like what? You did say sex, not rape. I'm not clear on how consensual it was, and he's 13. He's not even fully sexually mature yet. So you're being willing to do him in a couple of years. You took ground in frustration. Why would I ever come to you for support? Because the only one you have to talk to anymore is the voice inside your head. Cute, she thought to Matatobi humorlessly. She got up and made for the front door. I have to patch things up with him. Talk to you later. Bye bye, my adorable little kitten, shot a con. Her eyes began to twitch fiercely. She noticed the box that was opened up next to the door and the letter that came inside. She read the letter only up to mentioning of the training ground date and promptly spat out the door in search of her husband. Link break. Training ground 8. Naruto was getting the hang of swordplay. Not that he would be able to seriously fight against an opponent with battle experience anytime soon, but he was getting used to wielding sword and the several strikes that came along with it. Once Omoi had given him the thumbs up of approval towards his slash form, he had been instructed to continue doing the strikes over and over to get them recorded in his muscle memory. But that kind of thing was boring for Naruto. Naruto may not like sitting still for longer periods of time, but doing monotonous work for long periods of time was almost quite as bad. So he decided to ask some questions to alleviate the boredom. Omoi and Kaori had started sparring, but Samui was just watching him to do the katas, probably to make sure that he was getting them right. How high up is Kumo? Naruto asked. About 6,500 feet above sea level, Samui responded. That's really high. Yeah, we were not called the village hidden in the clouds for nothing. Naruto could believe that. He looked up at the crags and spires that jolted up through clouds, and with a slight sense of awe, it looked like rocks were taking a bath in milk. So why are there so many dark-skinned people? Omoi and Kaori stopped sparring and stared at him with stupefied expression. What's that supposed to mean? Kaori asked. Naruto got scared that he might have flubbed that question. It's just that there aren't very many dark-skinned people in Konoha, he said quickly. Really? Kaori asked. Yeah, if fact that big guy was the first black person I met. All three of their eyes widened. Black was the main ethnicity in Kumo. To hear that there were so few people of color that Naruto had yet to meet one before B was slightly jarring. They were about to further question Naruto but were interrupted by Yuichiro flying in. She was breathing heavily, her eyes were wide and dilated, and her hair was dampish. She quickly walked up to Naruto, who blushed upon remembrance of the morning activity. She didn't take the blush on his face as a practically good sign. Omoi, Kaori, Samui, she said, acknowledging their presence. They looked at her in confusion, although they knew each other mostly from the fact that B and Yuito were the Jinchuriki of Kumo, B being their sensei, and assured that they would have met. Whenever they did meet, Yuito would be withdrawn, cold, and unfriendly. So seeing her in this state was slightly worrisome. Looking at Naruto, she immediately averted her gaze to anywhere but his eyes. I need to talk to you, she said simply. Whoa, wait. Why do you need to talk with him? Kaori asked. She started fidgeting nervously. Look, I just need to talk to him alone for a few seconds, she said again. Naruto was starting to get nervous too. It's okay guys, I'll be right back, he said with one of his patent foxy smiles. He and Yuichiro started to hop away a distance from the three bewildered Kumo Genins. Once they were out of sight from the Genin team, Yuichiro stopped and got on one knee to get on eye level of Naruto. Listen, do you remember what happened? Yuichiro asked Naruto. He started blushing in and fidgeted slightly. She was planning on confirming what happened, then going on to explain that she was going to try her best to put everything that happened behind her. Yeah, you weren't supposed to, Naruto said, alluding to the fact that once sleepwalkers were put to bed, they were supposed to have forgotten everything that they did while they were waking up. The statement perplexed Yuichiro for a second, but then a few things clicked in her side. Wait, I wasn't supposed to remember? Did you drug me? Yuichiro's eyes went wider than they had ever been. She grabbed Naruto's shoulder and slammed into the ground in a moment of fantastic fury. "You raped me," she shouted at him. Naruto was having trouble breathing from his sudden slam onto the ground. Yuito extended her claws ominously. Her eyes were full of emotion, disappointment, rage, disbelief, horror, but most prominently of all was betrayal. Tears began to well up in her eyes and she began to shake. "I trusted you," she said quietly. Yuito was trembling violently, enough to the point where her shaking hands were making him worried that she might cut something important by accident or on purpose. Naruto finally got control of his breathing and immediately shouted, "You were sleepwalking." This caused Yuito to stop shaking quite as much. She held her sharpened claws to Naruto's throat and whispered, "What did you say?" Naruto calmly explained what happened to the morning to Yuito, or at least as calmly as one could, with sharpened claws directed towards one's throat. After hearing his explanation, she backed off of him, retracting her claws and sighing in relief. "You thought I raped you?" Naruto asked while getting up. He was extremely freaked out by what Yuito had done and was shaking slightly in fear. Yuito took a moment but was able to explain her side of the story, which made Naruto was able to laugh at. "But I was knocked out. How could we have had sex?" he asked. "I don't know. I guess I wasn't thinking properly. I've been having a really strange morning." They both looked at each other straight in the eyes and burst out in laughing. Naruto was laughing at the absurdity of the whole situation while Yuito was laughing only in relief. Miscommunication leads to misunderstanding, which leads to conflicts, and which leads to death, which leads to hate, and thus the cycle of hate perpetuates itself. Naruto got up and dusted himself off. "I have to go back to train." Yuito also got up. "Yeah, I think I need to go rest a bit," she replied shakily. Naruto chuckled a bit. "You sure do sleep a lot." That she did. Link break. Training ground 8-6. Naruto was gasping for breath and covered in sweat. To go through a kata movement does take very little energy, but doing the kata movements for hours on end while little to no rest does take a toll on your body. That's probably good enough for today," Kaori said. Naruto was doubled over, only sporting by the katana that he was leaning on. When he fell over backwards to fully try and catch his breath, Kaori looked on the slight administration and then addressed Amoy. "I never seen someone work so hard before." Amoy looked on at the sight of Naruto gasping for air on the ground as well. "Yeah, he is taking really well to Kenjutsu, or at least a lot better than I would have expected from a Konoha shinobi." Samui walked up and nudged him on the side. "It's not cool for you to stay here. Where do you sleep?" Naruto half-heartedly waved her off. "It's fine, I got a place to stay." He then proceeded to get himself back up and stretched his sore muscles. "How long are you staying here?" Samui asked. "Granny said that I've been taking weekly rotations." Naruto then began to walk in the direction that he came from. "Wait," Samui said. Naruto looked back at her. "I'm going across the elemental nations, every major village and waterfall. It's happening in weeks rotation." "Oh." This somewhat surprised Samui. Usually diplomats only tried to connect to one village or country at a time anymore, and one would run the risk of making an egregious mistake by way of accidentally swapping different cultures' customs. But then again, Naruto seemed to only have passing knowledge on the hidden village of Kumo, and it wasn't like he was doing anything to spawn the gap between countries. He was just being trained by them. This was a perplexing situation to Samui. He jogged off in the direction of Yuito's house, leaving the Genin team on their own devices. On his light job to Yujito's house, he passed by a supermarket. Remembering Yujito's dismal pantry, he decided to get some actual food for them. Reaching around in his pockets, he found a wallet brimming with cash. Source: must be foreign policy to give diplomats huge sum of spending cash. After making the purchases, he made his way back to Yujito's, where he found her in the middle of the living room whilst meditating. Deciding not to disturb her, he began cooking the meal straight away. As fumes of dinery goodness made its way across the house, Yujito began to perk up. Cutting her session with Madetabe short, she made her way to the kitchen, where she found Naruto putting the finished touch on fried fish. Naruto noticed her presence and looked back at her with a foxy grin. "Do you like fish?" he asked. She nodded absently. Yujito still wasn't used to the concept of a home cooked meal, so this gesture was really rather touching to her. He set the plates down and brought them over to the table. Setting down the plates with the silverware for his wife, he sat down and began to eat his food slower than he usually would. She sat down and began to eat her fried fish as well. It was good, not splendid, but definitely a net positive. Look, Naruto started. I'm really sorry about the whole misunderstanding this morning, he said with an apologetic expression. Oh, it's fine. I probably overreacted anyway, she responded while fidgeting nervously. No, it's not your fault. I knew that I shouldn't have left a note or something, but he didn't because he was a little low on time at the time. Look, can we just drop it? She asked earnestly. Naruto looked at her with a wistful expression. Yeah, okay. He looked like he had something more to say, but decided not to continue. What? You look like you have something more to say, so just say it, Yuto said plainly. It's just, he began. I would never try to hurt a person precious to me, and you're one of the people most precious to me, he said. Yuto gave a slight smile with a mouth full of fish. After swallowing, she replied, Same with you. She wasn't a poet after all. After cleaning their plates, they made their way to the bed, where they both cuddled in for the night. Miscommunication leads to misunderstanding, which leads to conflict. However, conflict doesn't not inherently mean something bad. Conflict is at its core conflict as its core definition is an interaction, and although most interactions between humans of different cultures end up with death, sometimes they end up in love, but only in the rarest of cases. As this is where I'm gonna leave this part of, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry about the stuttering and going so fast. If I covered this chapter so fast, that's because I'm running down with a fever, and I asked you guys, but none of you replied. Funny enough. So I figured you guys might be sleeping at the time because it's morning right here. So yeah, this is Apollo Uchiha and I'm signing out. Peace.